Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking Thor Ragnarok. Uh, I suppose I might want to actually say Thor Battle Royale. You see, I live in Japan, and Thor Battle Royale is the Japanese title of this movie. Uh, Probably changed because simply the idea of Ragnarok is not as well known here in Japan. And of course, the movie Battle Royale from, boy, something like 15 years ago is, still something that people, I suppose, remember. And it does sort of nicely tie into the whole arena aspect of this movie. So let's just kind of get right into things. So, as usual with these things, I'm going to speak about the movie in general, and then I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about some of the spoilers. All in all, I thought this was a really good movie. It was the most fun Marvel movie that I can really remember. I mean, Spider-Man Homecoming had a lot of really great funny moments, but this is the first movie that really kind of just honestly, in a lot of ways, felt like a comedy, albeit an action comedy with some very heartfelt moments. And, even the movie's director, a fellow with a bit of a difficult to pronounce New Zealand name, even said that, yeah, in his mind, this movie was a comedy. And it works. There is some genuinely hilarious stuff in this film. And it really does sort of feel like this sort of comedic action adventure with, sometimes serious moments, as I said, is really the big thing that's going on here. And one thing that I really loved about this movie is that it feels like an enormous shout out to all of these really over the top, cheesy but very enjoyable movies from the 1980s. In fact, the director even said that Flash Gordon was a big influence on this movie. And I've seen that, and you can definitely see a little bit of Flash Gordon going on here in this film. Um, Incidentally, the actual Flash Gordon from like 1980, that's recommended. That's a very enjoyable film, and I mean the soundtrack to it was done by Queen, which is just, oh, Queen, man, I love that band. They're so great. I mean, even like the music, there's a lot of synthesizer stuff going on, and just the style of the titles, the Thor Ragnarok titles, are done in this font that looks like something from an old movie from the 80s. Even that, and I'm pretty sure that like when we see the statue of the Grand Master, it's probably intended as a little bit of a shout out to the poster for Big Trouble in Little China. Okay, I guess I suppose that was a tiny bit of a spoiler, but whatever. Anyway, let's just kind of get right into things. So, as I said, this is a really fun movie. I really loved the comedy aspects. I mean, we've all seen the trailers, and there's that bit where Thor yells, "It's like just the Hulk busts out, and Thor is like, yes, he's a friend from work," which is just like the most hilarious thing ever. And I mean, oh man, that's not even the end of it. I mean, there are just so many funny moments in this movie, um, and it just works so well. And as I said, there are also some very heartfelt moments and a lot of good action. I mean, it's all a really nice mix. But at the end of the day, this is really primarily a comedy. And while not every single joke works, and sometimes things get pushed a little too far, for the most part, this is really well done stuff, and I enjoyed it immensely. In terms of the characters, everybody kind of has their little moments, everybody has their little journeys. Thor, Loki, and Valkyrie are our big characters this time around, and all of them do have show some growth as characters. Everybody gets to have their moments to really shine. There's plenty of comedy, plenty of genuine heartfelt stuff going around with everyone. You got Mark Ruffalo coming back as the Hulk. Oh yeah, and I got to tell you guys, since I saw this movie in Japan, uh, and they do this sometimes with foreign markets, is they may have the actors and people behind it make these sort of little special intros to each market. There was just one with Mark Ruffalo and oh heck, Chris Helmsworth. I forgot his name for a minute. Just sort of like specifically talking to the Japanese audience, and like Chris Helmsworth basically just keeps saying so, which is basically kind of like that's right in Japanese, and it's always kind of hilarious when you see like actors who do this. I mean, I remember there's this one thing I can't remember what it was for, where Steven Spielberg speaks this incredibly wooden Japanese that he's just clearly like reading off a card that somebody had like written it out in like in English letters for him. I mean it's really that's pretty hilarious. Um, of course, the so sound is quite easy to make even for native English speakers. So it's not like Chris Helmsworth really had to stretch himself there in terms of his language, but it was just pretty cool just to sort of see them there having a little like, oh hey Japan kind of thing. Uh, and what was even hilarious is this is followed up by basically the exact same thing with the cast of Justice League doing their own trailer, and incidentally, that Justice League trailer looks really cool. Um, so yeah, like it's seeing like all the cast of Justice League coming in there saying like, "Oh yeah, hey Japan." It's just like, wow. Oh yeah, and speaking of the theaters in Japan, if you see my other reviews, the theaters here often have like merchandise out in the lobby, and they had some really cool merchandise. I mean, there were like bandanas with Thor and Loki. No, with the Thor and the Hulk on them. There's even like a Hulk versus Thor wristbands. There were buttons, um, you know, clear files, like little Mjolnir desk um, desk ornaments, I guess I could say. There was some sort of a cup or a shot glass or something that was in a box. I couldn't see it. I didn't crack it open because you got to be careful about doing stuff like there. You never know exactly what you're allowed to touch sometimes. Um, there was a cool sticker, Hulk versus Thor sticker, and yeah, I mean just some. Oh yeah, and like a little sword toy that was also pretty cool. And I mean, this stuff is all actually priced pretty reasonably too, but I didn't pick up anything just because, you know, there was nothing that I particularly wanted. I kind of felt like I'd have been buying something for the sake of buying it. Although I did give some serious consideration to the Hulk versus Thor notebook, because I was actually in need of a notebook, but I took a pass because, you know, $8 for a notebook is a little much. Anyway, getting back into the story itself, I've got really no problem with any of the casting. Like I said, I really love the '80s music. The comedy is well done. I mean, like this is just a really well put together film, and the fact that they're willing to primarily make it a comedy is, in all honesty, kind of a new thing. I mean, obviously, comedy has always played a big role in the other Marvel movies, but here having this be something that is flat out a comedy, and that primarily, that's new. That's interesting to me. Um, and it does sort of set the stage a little bit for the new Warriors TV show that they're working on, which again is going to be something that is primarily a comedy. And yeah, I mean, in terms of non-spoilery stuff, that's everything I had to say. It's just great acting, hilarious comedy, good action, some really heartfelt moments. And I mean, it's just a really enjoyable package. I had an immense amount of fun watching this movie, and I really did enjoy it. So let's take a minute to give everybody a second who doesn't want spoilers to step away, and we're going to go to talk about the more spoilery stuff. Okay. So I like how they very quickly wrapped up the whole thing with like, okay, Loki impersonating Odin. And this leads to this absolutely hysterical scene of Hopkins acting like Loki's, Tom Hiddleston's Loki. It's just hilarious. I mean, it's Anthony Hopkins, so you know he's going to do a great job, but he just utterly nails every second of it just to this like where like where Odin's like spots Thor and just goes like, oh shit, to him yelling at Scourge, Yeah, well, it was really cool that they got Carl Urban to be Scourge. That was nicely done as well. And again, just like so much stuff happening with Loki, with him like, I was falling for 30 minutes, to Loki just being a smartass, and to him having that moment where the Hulk just stomps Thor like Loki did in the first Avengers movie, and Loki just starts saying, "Yes, that's what it's like." It's just like, God. I mean, the only complaint really I have about Loki in this movie is sort of like, dude, can you maybe use a comb or something? Because your hair looks awful. Oh, and speaking of Loki, and Anthony Hopkins and stuff, like when Odin, aka slash Loki, is watching this play based on the events of Thor 2, you've got Thor is played by Chris Helmsworth, real life brother. Sam Neill is Odin, and then Matt Damon plays Loki. So Matt Damon plays the actor playing Loki, Sam Neill, and apparently like Loki was Matt Damon was like the runner up to be Loki, and Sam Neill the runner up to be Odin. Which, I mean, cool. I mean, I did not. I'm like, man, it's like something about these guys looks familiar, and it wasn't until later that I realized, like, oh right, that's Matt Damon. And of course, there's more than a little hilarity to Matt Damon playing a character named Loki. Oh, well, I knocked over my water bottle. Thankfully, I had the cap on securely, so we're good. Uh, yeah, and Chris Helmsworth as Thor just continues to be absolutely hilarious. And I like this episode, this time around, that we show that Thor is a little bit smarter this time around. I mean, he actually pulls one over on Loki. He outsmarts Surtur, and shows that, you know what, Thor's actually got a decent brain in there that he can use well when he has to. And it kind of nicely shows Thor's growth there. And I also liked, of course, the friendship between Hulk and Thor. That was so hilariously done. And then they're just like they can very quickly switch from just like shouting at each other to sort of sitting there chilling, being bros together. It's so great. Oh man, and I absolutely love just Mark Ruffalo's just like completely out of his element. Bruce Banner on Sakaar, stuck wearing Tony Stark's clothes, which include a Duran Duran T-shirt. It's just like, oh, this is perfect. I love this. And then he puts on Tony's sunglasses, and they look hideous on him. It's great. Um, Let's see. Valkyrie is another character that we're introduced here, and I'm a little annoyed that they didn't even give her a name. Now, the Valkyrie in the comics that we know is, I believe her real name is Brunhild, um, but she's basically sort of what you would imagine a Valkyrie look like, you know, being a really pretty buff blonde lady, and the actress here playing her is, I believe, of black and Hispanic origin. Although we do get a character who gets killed during the fighting with Hela, who's a Valkyrie, that sort of looks like Brunhild in the comics. So I'm just assuming this isn't the Brunhild we know from the comics. This is just someone who was also a Valkyrie fulfilling that role, and that she has a different name. Although again, we never learn what Valkyrie's proper name is, and I'm okay with that. Valkyrie, I think, was a little underdeveloped, but she did get a decent character arc. She is shown as being a multifaceted character, and at the end of the day, it is still a Thor's movie. Valkyrie is a supporting character at the end of the day, I think. Well, okay, I gotta take that back. She really is a main character, but she's not the main character. We haven't been with her for like two previous movies, and thus of course, we're going to want to spend time with the character that we know better because yeah, that just makes more sense. But she does have a nice story arc as somebody who's dealing with terrible loss and is just trying to cope with it as best she can. And it all leads to Thor having this really great moment where he points out that, you know what, heroes run towards their problems, not run. They don't run away from them. And that's at the end of the day what Valkyrie is doing, is that she's running away from her problems. Granted, she's got good reasons to run away from her problems, but that's just not how you solve anything. You know, your problems are not something that you can physically or mentally put distance between in any real and meaningful way. Your problems are in here and in here. You know, it's been said many times, many ways, Merry Christmas to you, but also that we can't control what other people do. We can't control a lot of the world around us. We can only really control our reactions to what happens. And that's kind of what the situation is with Valkyrie. I mean, of course, things are going to happen to us that are bad, that are out of our control. That's just life. But it's how we deal with those. That's what's really in our control. And here, you know, she does need that kind of kick in the butt from Thor to kind of stop feeling sorry for herself and, you know, try and do something to fight once again for things that she cares about. And when she does quite well. She shows that you know, the Valkyries were no joke, and even Thor gushes about how badass they were, which, you know, is a real ringing endorsement. Um, I also like how the whole thing with you know, Asgard is its people, which again, a little bit cliche, but it is true. And it's this truth is enough to make even Loki sort of turn around and say, like, you know what, I'm going to fight genuinely selflessly for this because this is something that I care about. Because, you know, if Asgard is completely destroyed, even if I survive, you know, all the things that I grew up with, all the things that I used to value beyond myself are going to be destroyed. And, you know, as big a jerk as he is, even Loki does care about other things. And it's made very clear in this episode, he cared very deeply for the approval of Odin and Frigga. And when Thor is basically saying, like, okay, once all of this is over, it's really just better if we never see each other again, you can tell that despite all of their problems between them and their animosity, that, you know, Loki's a little bit hurt by this. He's a little upset that his brother genuinely has decided that to just, like, yeah, I just don't want anything more to do with you. I mean, of course, Thor has every reason in the world to feel that way, and you can tell that he's not happy about having to do this, but, you know, what else can you do under the circumstances? And here we see Loki turns it around. He does genuinely go out there and do something selfless because it's the right thing to do, and because this is something that matters to him, that has nothing to do with satiating his own ego. And, you know, that leads to that really nice scene at the end where Thor and Loki, okay, you know, the past can't be forgotten, but, you know, everybody's got bigger fish to fry, and focusing on little things that have happened in the past seem under the circumstances to be incredibly petty. I mean, Loki even says, are you sure it's really a good idea to take me back to Earth? And Thor's like, yeah, probably not. But, you know what? Loki, he's probably going to blow it, but he has earned another chance. And then, of course, Thanos' spaceship shows up. So, and I did really love the scenes between Thor, Odin, and Loki. It was very, very heartfelt stuff and very beautifully done. Let's see, what else? The whole stuff with Doctor Strange was hilarious. I absolutely love that. Especially like how Thor just keeps breaking stuff in Doctor Strange's house. That's just so great. I was pretty excited to hear Jeff Goldblum coming on to this movie. I mean, Jeff Goldblum's a really great actor. He's done lots of good stuff. He's got a very good sense of comedy. And, you know, given the comedic nature of this movie, he's somebody who I thought would fit in well. The problem with this is, as the Grandmaster, basically they brought Jeff Goldblum in to play pretty much every single character that Jeff Goldblum plays. I mean, seriously, if you listen to like just the way he's talking and stuff, he sounds like Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, only, you know, a little bit more megalomaniacal. I mean, there really just does not seem to be a huge difference between these two characters, just the way they speak and all this other stuff. I mean, granted, they're being played by the same actor, and you know, Jeff Goldblum, while a good actor, is one of those actors that kind of has things that he really excels at, but those things that he excels at tend to look the same in all of his movies. So it was really kind of hard for me to look at the Grandmaster and see a character from the comic books that I know. It's just sort of like Jeff Goldblum in some really goofy costumes. Although I will say I did really like the costuming in this movie. It was wonderfully done. And they really went whole hog on embracing the really kitschy stuff of those old Jack Kirby comics that really did so much to define the cosmic side of the Marvel Universe. Also, a few nice little nods to the old Planet Hulk storyline. In fact, Korg was even voiced by the fella who was the director of this movie, and Korg and Meek serve as some really nice moments of comic relief, which nicely done. Let's see, what else? I do think that kind of covers the majority of things that I wanted to talk about this episode. So I guess I'll wrap this up with just two more little things from the Japanese translation of the movie that I noticed. One was there's this part where Thor, oh yeah, Hela. Yeah, Hela, we have to talk about her and Surtur. Really liked the fight with Surtur at the beginning, and then them bringing him back to destroy Asgard at the end. It was really nicely done. Never unhappy to see Clancy Brown doing voice work. I love Clancy Brown. I love that man so much. He's just done so much great stuff. And they got Cate Blanchett as Hela, just absolutely just going to town with all this. I mean, you could tell this is a lady who's just having a blast with this. And man, she does it like Hela is really seriously badass, and it's done so well with her. Scourge I thought was a little underdeveloped, but he did have, at the end of the day, a solid character arc. Just one that I think maybe could have used a little bit more fleshing out. And maybe some stuff to make him seem a little bit more competent than he ultimately did, but, you know, whatever. Anyway, so coming back to some of the interesting little quirks of the Japanese translation. There's this thing where Hela and Thor are fighting, and she says something like, "You're nothing," or "You're the god of nothing." And the Japanese translation translated that as, instead of, I'm pretty sure she said the god of nothing. They actually translated as her saying, "You're the god of shit," which I was like, well, that's quite a bit harsher than what she actually said in English, but okay. It does get the idea across. And there's one thing that was kind of hilarious where in that situation what they said in Japanese was worse than what they said in English. And in this other situation where they're talking about the Grandmaster's ship being a place where he has orgies, the translation just simply says that's a place where he has parties. So that was surprisingly toned down. Although it is worth noting that the word that kusto, the word that is usually used to equivalently to shit in English, is not considered as harsh a word in Japanese as it is in English. I mean, like, you'll even hear like little kids say that when they're annoyed by something, although it's sort of like, oh hey, no. But again, it's just that word is simply not as thought of as negatively as it is in English. Okay, guys, so I've been at this for the better part of half an hour, so I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and please join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Excuse me. Until next time, take care and have a good one.